2 years after the vision of the four beasts, Daniel received another vision of kingdoms having end-time significance over the Jewish race. As with the previous vision, Daniel was troubled, but this time to the extent that he became physically ill. Since the interpretation of these animals are given in the vision, there are no reputable scholars out there that dispute the identification of these two kingdoms as being the Medo-Persian and the Grecian Empire. However, since the decimation of the temple sanctuary and the rise of the little horn is a dominant theme towards the end of this chapter, this does provide room for critical debate.
There is a marked shift in the writing style of this chapter, where the text switches from Aramaic to Hebrew. It does seem to indicate that the events from this point forward about to be prophesied has significant effects for the Jewish people.
In the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me previously. And I saw in the vision, and when I looked, I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. I saw in the vision, and I was by the river Ulai.
According to the Babylonian chronicles discovered in 1887, King Belshazzar was appointed as co-regent king with Nabonidus in 553 BC over the Babylonian Empire. The 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign was confirmed as occurring in 551 BC. Now Daniel took great care to describe this as a vision on 8 occasions while relaying his interpretation. He indicates that this vision is after that which appeared to me previously, confirming the 2-year separation between events. In this respect, he purposefully separates the prophecies of chapter 7 and 8, not only using time indicators, but also differentiating it between dreams and visions. While chapter 7 had left Daniel perplexed, keeping the matter to himself, it becomes apparent that with this vision, that Daniel's righteous pondering over the previous dream and its interpretation provided fertile grounds for God to reveal even more information to him concerning the kingdoms and rulers who would have a dominating effect on the Jewish race. It also appears to be the usual business for prophets to be teleported to a place of prominence to which their visions relate. Ezekiel was in a similar vision transported from Babylon to Jerusalem, while John the Apostle was carried away in the Spirit to a wilderness. According to history, Susa would become the eventual capital of the Persian Empire. It was located 362 kilometers or 225 miles to the east of Babylon. It was a city previously destroyed by the Assyrians and would later be rebuilt during the reign of Darius I. Since Daniel is standing by the river Ulai, the citadel of Susa is better translated as the capital and not citadel. The river Ulai is believed to be the Kirkar River, which flowed on the outskirts of Susa. Now Daniel's vision took place in a little town close to a canal, which would later become an important place as the capital of Persia, the same city where Esther would become queen, and the city from which Nehemiah would travel towards Jerusalem. It would also serve as a summer retreat to the kings of Persia.
Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, and the longer one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, and northward, and southward, and no animals could stand before him. Neither was there any who could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will, and became great.
Now we see another animal with horns in this vision, and this time it is a ram with 2 horns. While we know from the vision of chapter 7 that a horn represents a ruler of a further subdivision in a kingdom or empire, the interpretation is given later where the ram is specifically identified as the kings of Media and Persia. Note the details in the prophecy. Just as the one horn was longer than the other, Persia was significantly greater in size and strength than the kingdom of the Medes and would later take over this joint empire. Even the location matches, as the ram was in the east, in other words, east of Jerusalem. We know this as it was described as pushing westward, northwards, and southwards. History reveals the brutality and rapid expansion of the Persian Empire throughout the inhabitable world. All men between the ages of 20 and 50 were required to serve in the military, where they were trained in archery, hand-to-hand combat, mounted combat, and the older men would inherently become spearmen. The armies of Persia included an elite group known as the Immortals, who would always be kept at a number of 10,000, and many would serve as bodyguards for the Persian kings. Although Persia would have a limited expansion to the east, it spread rapidly northwards, westwards, and southwards as Daniel predicted, well beyond his lifetime. The phrase, "he did according to his will and became great," has clearly one king in mind, and many scholars believe this is referring to King Cyrus, who was brought to his end in a battle east of his empire, fighting nomads in 530 BC.
As I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west over the surface of the whole earth, and did not touch the ground. And the goat had a prominent horn between his eyes.
Although Daniel had not yet received an understanding of this vision, he was suddenly interrupted and observed a male goat rising from the west, its feet not touching the ground and covering the surface of the earth. Just as the ram was identified as the United Kingdom of Persia, so this goat is interpreted later as representing the Kingdom of Greece. The sands of time were shifting. Just as the horns of the ram refer to kings and kingdoms, this prominent horn is interpreted for us as being the first king of the Grecian Empire. We find this in verse 22. Daniel never saw the fulfillment of this aspect of this prophecy in his lifetime, as it was fulfilled more than 2 centuries after his time. King Alexander proved to represent this prominent horn, and was the first king of Greece to possess the entire inhabitable world, fulfilling the role of the Great Horn. The details are so accurate that some scholars suggest certain parts must have been edited at a later stage, despite the incredibly vast evidence to the contrary. But this is a liberal theme that continues throughout Daniel.
He came to the ram that had the 2 horns, which I saw standing before the river, and rushed at him in the fury of his power. I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with anger against him, and he struck the ram and broke his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he threw him down to the ground and trampled on him, and there was no one who could deliver the ram from his power.
You will notice that the goat, Greece, was furious. Why? As a backdrop, historically the ram, Persia, attempted to attack Greece, which was then known as the Greco-Persian Wars, which lasted for 50 years. Although at that stage Persia was far superior in size and strength, it failed to defeat the alliance of Greek forces. Greece, however, was unable to take its fight to Persia, and Persia remained the dominant kingdom for another century, before internal squabbles within the empire would start to show cracks in its leadership and military abilities. In their failed attempt to conquer Europe, the Persians retreated, while the Greeks, after surviving the many extremely cruel attacks on their colonies, were seething with hatred and were cultivating revenge, evidence as boys in their youth. Just over a century later, the Greeks sought revenge under the leadership of the young King Alexander. Just as the vision portrayed the ram as being trampled by the goat, breaking both horns, so in a relatively short period of time, King Alexander brought their mighty Persian Empire to an abrupt end. Although there were initial skirmishes between the Greek forces under King Alexander, there were 3 major battles which over a few short years subdued the Persian Empire. So of the 3 major battles, the first was the Battle of Granicus in 334 BC. This would pave the way for the Grecian invasion of Persia. The second battle, the Battle of Issus, a year later in 333 BC, would establish King Alexander as a master tactician. The final battle 2 years later occurred at Gaugamela in 331 BC and would be the death knell of the Persians. The losses of these 3 major battles demoralized the fighting abilities of the Persians, and within a year, King Alexander was in control of the largest world empire to date. This empire became known as the Grecian Empire. He subsequently expanded his territories to include the southwestern territories of Egypt, and the eastern part of his empire stretched as far as Afghanistan on the border with India.
The male goat became very strong, but when he was strong, the large horn was broken, and instead of it there came up 4 prominent horns towards the 4 winds of heaven.
Having the keys to the vision, another element emerges from Daniel's account, where the prominent large horn of the male goat is described as breaking, replaced by 4 prominent horns. As prophesied centuries earlier, King Alexander died at a tender age of 33 at the height of his power. Since there was no heir to the throne, the Grecian Empire divided into 4 distinct kingdoms, each assigned one of King Alexander's 4 generals as its leader. General Ptolemy was given authority over Egypt and its adjacent countries. General Seleucus headed up Syria, Asia Minor, and the territories towards the east. This general expanded on his allotment and eventually took control of the eastern territories of the Medo-Persian Empire. General Lysimachus headed up Thrace and its adjoining territories, while General Cassander ruled Greece and Macedonia. Out of one of them came forth a little horn, which grew exceeding great towards the south and towards the east and toward the beautiful land. So Daniel prophesied out of one of these 4 kingdoms would emerge a little horn, later described as a king which grew exceedingly great. He would expand towards the southeast and towards the beautiful land. Since no mention is made of the north, with prophecy always being centralized around Jerusalem, it is by implication that this ruler originates from the kingdom of Syria, then known as the Seleucid Empire. The beautiful land, although often applied to refer to Israel or Canaan, in this context suggests it is referring to Jerusalem. History reveals that the 8th king in the Syrian dynasty accomplished many of the same events prophesied by Daniel. The king was known as Antiochus Epiphanes, who stole the throne from his nephew and ruled between 175 BC and 164 BC. A few years into his reign, he attempted to overthrow the Ptolemaic Empire and made large inroads in the south, as Daniel had predicted. Similarly, he made significant inroads to the east, subduing the region in Parthia and Armenia. However, he found no traction to the west, and the balance of his career was focused on battles to the south and east of his empire, placing Jerusalem, the beautiful land, in his crosshairs.
It grew so great that it reached the host of heaven, and some of the hosts and of the stars it cast down to the ground, and trampled on them. And it magnified itself, even against the prince of the host. And it took away from him the daily sacrifice, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. The host was given over to it, together with the daily sacrifice, because of transgression. And it cast down truth to the ground, and kept prospering.
How do futurists understand the meaning of the little horn, challenging the host of heaven and casting them to the ground? The phrase host of heaven, depending upon its context, can refer to people of God or angels. However, we are given a great clue as the host is given over to transgression. Since transgressions are a deliberate sin against God, it can only refer to God's people and not angelic beings. It appears correct, as a man cannot cast angels out of heaven nor trample upon them. So in its simplest form, this little horn would not only attack God's people, but he would prosper in doing so. Historically, this event was largely fulfilled by Antiochus Epiphanes, barring a few question marks to a surprising T, almost 4 centuries after Daniel uttered these words. Antiochus, the 8th king in the Seleucid dynasty, attempted to gain control of the Jewish hierarchy while attacking the Ptolemaic or Egyptian kingdom. The support of some in Jerusalem led to a divided Jewish nation. The more liberal Jews would support him, while the conservative religious Jews would attempt to counter his every move. His pursuits against Egypt would constantly have him entering through Jerusalem. However, his attacks against Egypt would come to a halt as the Romans intervened upon the request of Egypt and drew a line in the sand. Antiochus was in a quagmire, as if he continued his aggression against Egypt, the Romans would side with Egypt. This ultimatum enraged Antiochus, who then in 168 BC decided to rather invade Jerusalem on the Sabbath with 20,000 troops, bringing great destruction to Jerusalem. He certainly had an intense hatred for the Jews. A year later, in 167 BC, he built an altar to Zeus in the temple of the Jews. If this was not enough, he then offered a pig as his chosen sacrifice within the Jewish temple. Following this, he renamed the temple of God the Temple of Zeus. This offering of the pig as a sacrifice was an insult to both the Jews and to God, and became known as the abomination of desolation, as his actions would have dire consequences. The same phrase is so important, it is used another 3 times in Daniel's writings.
Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who spoke, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression that makes desolate, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled? He said to me, 2,300 evenings and mornings, then shall the sanctuary be restored to its rightful state.
At this point, Daniel heard 2 heavenly beings in conversation, and in his vision he looked upwards. The one heavenly being asked the other, how long would it take before the restoration of the temple to its rightful position? The angel then turned, and instead of answering the other heavenly being, answered Daniel directly, saying that it would take 2,300 evenings and mornings before it is fully restored. While there are a few ways in which the 2,300 evenings and mornings are understood, the 2 major futuristic schools of thought believe there are either 2,300 literal days or 1,150 days, as the scriptures divide them between evening and morning. Having said this, most believe in the 1,150-day view. Historically, Antiochus desecrated the Jewish temple on 25 December 167 BC, but the temple was fully restored on 14 December 164 BC, 3 years later. When one applies the difference between either Christian or Jewish calendars, there remains a discrepancy of between 45 to 60 days, placing severe question marks as to him fulfilling this prophecy in its entirety. Before we move on to the next aspects of the vision, we do know that Antiochus would eventually succumb to a strange stomach disease. While there are conflicting historical accounts of his death, according to 2 Maccabees, an apocryphal book, this tyrant of a king eventually succumbed to his disease, resulting in him injuring his entire body upon falling out of a chariot. Days later, he drowned at sea within days, either before or after the temple rededication. Now, amongst futurists, we are divided as to the full understanding of this prophecy. Some believe that Antiochus fulfilled all aspects of the prophecy, while others, including myself, believe Antiochus was merely a forerunner or a prototype of someone worse to come. You make up your mind after considering the further details revealed by the Archangel Gabriel.
It came about when I, Daniel, had seen the vision that I sought to understand it. And behold, there stood before me someone who appeared to be a man. I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, and it called out and said, "Gabriel, make this man understand the vision." So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was frightened and fell prostrate. But he said to me, "Understand, son of man, that the vision belongs to the time of the end." Now as he was speaking with me, I fell into a deep sleep, with my face towards the ground. But he touched me and stood me upright. He said, "Behold, I will make you know what shall be in the latter time of wrath, for it belongs to the appointed time of the end."
Daniel was naturally seeking answers. Instantly, Daniel observed a heavenly being appearing like a man before him. At the same time, he heard a man's voice resonating from the river of Ulai, calling out to Gabriel to make Daniel understand the vision. It is for the first time that the name of Gabriel is used in the Bible. He is instructed to provide an understanding of the vision to Daniel and will appear for a second time to Daniel in the next chapter in the vision of the 77s. More than 500 years later, Gabriel would also appear to Zechariah and Mary, the mother of Jesus. The fact that Daniel fell prostrate when Gabriel revealed himself in the vision is a typical result of man interacting with heavenly beings. We see this in Ezekiel, the book of Judges, and in Revelation. Gabriel attempts to calm Daniel, but Daniel fell into a deep sleep as Gabriel described the events as only occurring with the time of the end. Gabriel responded by touching Daniel and raising him onto his feet. For a second time, Gabriel informs him that the vision he had just seen related to the latter time of wrath, and therefore it belongs with the appointed time of the end. The time of wrath and the time of the end are often associated with the prophetic phrases, the Great Tribulation and the Day of the Lord. Almost 200 years after Antiochus, Jesus revealed that the time of wrath was yet to come. This is what the scriptures reveal to us between 45 and 62 AD. Since it is He that saves us from wrath, we know that aspects of this vision can only be completed in the future. Of course, for Christians, there is a beautiful promise embedded within these verses.
The ram which you saw, that had the two horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. The male goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. As for that which was broken, in the place where four stood up, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of his nation, but not with his power. In the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressions have reached their full measure, a rash and deceitful king shall arise. His power shall be great, but not by his own strength, and he shall cause terrible destruction, and shall succeed in everything he does. And he shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Through his cunning, he shall cause deceit to prosper by his influence, and he shall be great in his own mind. And without warning, he shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he will be shattered, but not by human hands.
It is in this section that Gabriel reveals and confirms our understanding from scriptures with all the keys. The ram is Media Persia, and the goat together with a prominent horn as symbols of Greece and King Alexander. Also, he confirms the subdivision of the kingdom into 4 smaller kingdoms, represented by 4 horns, or rulers, as well as the big showdown and the rise of a little horn. With Gabriel's revelation, it goes much further than Antiochus' time period. Let's examine the reasons why many futurists believe that this is a dual fulfillment. fulfilled partially by Antiochus in 168 BC, but its full fulfillment will still take place at a designated point, yet still in the future. Gabriel reveals that the little horn will emerge in the latter time of their kingdom. Antiochus was the 8th king of the Seleucid Empire, who died in 164 BC, with another 100 years of kings to follow before its demise. So Antiochus is around the midpoint rule and not in the latter time of their kingdom. Another phrase, succeed in everything he does. In contrast, Antiochus lost many battles. He was afraid and backed away from the Romans, and he even had schemes with the Egyptians that did not pan out. He clearly was not successful in everything he did. Another statement that confirms Antiochus rather as a forerunner is that he shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. While Antiochus did cause terrible destruction of the Jews, they were eventually able to resist through the guerrilla warfare of the Maccabees, which led to their later independence. Don't get me wrong, although there were many brutal deaths, the Jews persevered and later excelled. Finally, Gabriel reveals that the little horn will stand up to the Prince of Princes, a title reserved for Jesus. Clearly, he could not do this, as Jesus was only revealed a century and a half later. Although Antiochus' exact death remains a mystery, he still died of natural causes and not at the hands of God. The entire chapter rather illustrates the character of the future Antichrist, who will possibly have Syrian origins. Unlike the prototype in Antiochus Epiphanes, the real deal will destroy the mighty and the holy people, and will succeed in everything he does. Nobody will be able to stand against him. According to prophecies, he arises at the time of the end, which we discuss in the last 2 visions Daniel receives. Such is the nature of this end times ruler, recorded in the book of Revelation. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them, and it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation.
The vision of the evenings and mornings which has been told is true, but seal up the vision because it refers to many days from now. I, Daniel, was overcome and was ill for days. Then I rose up and carried out the king's business, and I was astonished by the vision, but there was no one to explain it.
The vision both challenged Daniel physically and emotionally, as he was drained to a point of exhaustion for days. When he rose up, he immediately went about his usual duties, performing the tasks of the king. While complete aspects of the vision has been fulfilled in history, the emphasis of this vision are on the evenings and mornings, which relate to the ultimate desecration of the Jewish temple and the final persecution of the Jewish race. With these final words, Gabriel commands Daniel to seal up the vision, meaning to record and preserve its words, for it will only be accomplished in the future. It is not clear within the text how long the words are to remain sealed. However, it does imply that it will be revealed in the time of its fulfillment. Although he was astonished and had elements explained to him, Daniel lacked understanding, as it was reserved for periods well beyond his lifetime, and arguably still awaiting fulfillment in our lifetimes. As such, Daniel has for the first time recorded information not for his own understanding, but for the benefit of future generations. See you in the next episode, where we explore another incredibly fascinating prophecy, known as the Vision of the 77s. Until next time, Maranatha.